Do you find YouTube brand deals and sponsorships confusing and scary? And it seems like some creators have cracked the code while others, including me, are shooting in the dark to see what sticks? If you feel like me, this episode is for you because you will learn from Justin Moore, the creator wizard, an expert in content sponsorships. With more than a decade of experience working with brands, he's now helping creators like you and me find and negotiate lucrative brand deals and how to cultivate relationships with brands to bring more money to the bank and amazing opportunities to your inbox. You will learn how to overcome negative money mindsets that may interfere with how you negotiate with brands, what happens when you get rejected by a brand, and how to turn those no's into yeses. He'll share his formula for securing hundreds of thousands of dollars in brand deals for himself, his students, and his clients, and how to work with brands even when you have 0 followers and subscribers. So whether you are a new creator posting content on YouTube or you've been at this for a while and still struggle with brand sponsorships, you will find this episode extremely valuable. And the only thing that I ask for is that you like this episode and that you share it with another creator. The description of this episode includes links to the Creator Wizard to check Justin's work and subscribe to his newsletter, as well as our resources if you're ready to start your podcast or video podcast. Are you ready? Let's dive in. Hot Sounds Cool presents Content Heavy, the podcast that helps online business owners make better content and more money. Let's hefe up. Justin, why does your work matter? Why you helping creators connect with companies, connect with brands, navigate this world that is sometimes confusing? Nobody knows what they're doing. Why does your work matter?
It's a great question, Veronica. My wife, April, and I, we've been creators for almost 15 years now. Started first YouTube channel in 2009, if you can believe it. And so we've been doing this a really long time. Way back in the day, by the way, before monetizing it was really a thing. Like the YouTube partner program had just kind of started. And so back in the day, a lot of us, I guess you could call OG creators, we did it for the love of the craft, right? And I think that there's this really tricky thing that happens. And it's kind of an imperceptible time where it's like you're on the content hamster wheel, you're chugging out whatever platform you're on, you're dancing for the algorithm, and you stop and you think like, okay, well, yeah, this is great. All these views, all these downloads, all these impressions, this is great. But you know what? I should like maybe start making some money from this, right? Like it's not free. Like either it's my time that I'm investing in editing it or recording it and doing it all myself, or maybe I have hired an editor or a VA, a virtual assistant, or a social media person to try to start helping with this growing presence that I'm building on the internet. I should probably try to find a way to kind of offset the costs that are coming right out of my pocket. For a lot of, let's say, YouTubers in particular, they think that AdSense is the end all be all. If I could just get monetized, then it's awesome. I could just put out the content, whatever I want, and I'll just get paid for it. Google will deposit a paycheck in my account every month. And that seems like the dream, right? But in my experience, and for my wife and I for the last many years, working with brands, working with partners and sponsors has always been such a massively more lucrative revenue stream for us, and has been one that's actually been the most sustainable over the last decade plus. Most people don't think that sponsorships are like that, though. They think that it's unpredictable, right? It's like, well, you can never really predict when a brand is going to reach out to you or this type of thing, right? And yeah, of course, if you're waiting for brands to come to you, it's going to be very unpredictable. But I think that the methodology, that the kind of system that my wife and I have developed over many years, as well as I ran an agency for many years, so I developed this system of like, no, it's actually takes you being proactive and creating a system where you can start to predict the revenue that you can bring in working with brands. And so I think if I could just sit creators down and realize, like, help them understand that, like, hey, it's okay to monetize your creativity. It's okay to monetize your art. It actually will help provide you the stamina to continue doing it for a long time period.
That's how we started. We started making content just because we needed a creative outlet. I quit my job as an attorney because that's not the life that I wanted for myself. So I wanted more freedom. We started creating content because my husband is an audio engineer and he knew about audio and video. So we started that route. And our road to start making good money from what we do has been one that it hasn't been straightforward. And sometimes find mentors like you. It can be the difference between a creator quitting or keep doing what they love. And that's why I think what you do is so important. Talking about the mindset, because I struggle with that. And I know that a lot of people in my community struggle with that. is this maybe low self-esteem, maybe coming from having a 9 to 5 and having that steady paycheck, or maybe getting paid for something that you enjoy doing feels wrong, like asking for
Mm.
money. So all of this wrong mindset that some creators have, and I include myself in those. How do you help your clients, your students, people who work with you to get over the negative money mindsets and to completely shift into what I do is valuable and I have a lot to offer and I'm a professional and I bring value to the table?
Let's specifically ask about you, Veronica. What is it for you? What are the blocks for you? What are the hesitations from your past, your childhood, your upbringing? What is it for you?
So for me, I'm from Colombia. So in my culture, you have to put the elbow grease. You have to suffer. You have to work 60 hours a week. If you're enjoying what you're doing, then that means that you're not working hard enough. And that's how I saw my parents, I saw my mom, I saw my friends suffering in their jobs, and that's how you make money. So for me to get rid of that mindset and to be like, so wait a minute. I enjoy my work. I enjoy making videos. I enjoy making content. And this company is paying me to do that. So I had to work through that resistance in me. And also there's a lot of I don't want to call it imposter syndrome because I feel like that's being overused. But it's like, oh, they're gonna find out that I don't know what the heck I'm doing. So that
Mm.
that was my experience.
Yeah. No, thank you for being vulnerable. It's not easy to talk about. And I can't tell you how many creators I speak with who have similar challenges. And a lot of it I found stems from our upbringing, especially if you like
Mhm.
grew up in a family where money was tight or it was taboo to discuss. Like you just didn't talk about money. That's like not a thing that you do in your family or your culture or whatever. It can be the difference between not hitting send on a pitch or an email to a brand. I've had situations where people told me I just would delete emails from brands because I'm so terrified. I'm so
Mhm.
petrified. I don't know what to say. I feel like I'm going to screw it up. So I'm just not going to respond. I'm not even going to do it. These represented like very lucrative 4 or 5 figure deals from very large advertisers. And that really just blew my mind because when I started educating creators, I jumped straight to the tactics. It's like, all right, here's this template and here's a framework and like, here's fill in the blank and here's a calculator and all this stuff, right? But when people said, okay, I get that, but I just can't hit send. And I'm like, what are you talking about? What do you mean? What's the problem,
Mhm.
right? And so I think it definitely is the mindset piece is so critical. And what I like to oftentimes sit creators down and talk them through is like, okay, let's for just a minute imagine that you are a brand, you are a marketer trying to achieve some sort of business outcome, right? You're trying to get more awareness about this new product launch or new feature, or you're trying to drive sales, right? You're trying to drive app downloads, software signups. Maybe the reason that you want to work with creators is because you want content. You actually don't have a very good presence on social media. You want more content for your social handles, for your website, maybe for paid advertising, right? There's basically those 3 different reasons that brands would want to collaborate with you. And so, for example, the scenario where they want content for you, let's say you ask them, hey, what would a win look like? Or what would success look like? And they tell you, well, we just love the way in which you create content. You're super polished. We would love to repurpose your content that you create. If you sit back and think, okay, what are their alternatives if they were not to hire me? Well, they'd have to go out there, Veronica, and they'd have to hire probably a production company, hire actors and actresses to star in that content. They'd have to hire editors to edit that content once it's done. And then once that asset is ultimately complete, they have to go out there and pay Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube to run the ad. Right. And so contrast it with you as a creator. You are the creative team. You're oftentimes the production crew. You're the camera crew. You shoot it. You edit the content. You market the content. And oh, by the way, you also have an organic distribution channel to distribute the content. And so I like to call creators production companies in a box because I just don't really quite think a lot of people realize the value that they could potentially provide to a brand, regardless of how many followers, downloads, or listens that you get.
I'm gonna listen to this piece over and over and over and over because, yes, what you said is so true. I remember the first time I sent the email asking for, and it wasn't even that much. Like my entire nervous system, I was just panicking. And then
Mm.
I have to work through that, but it's a struggle. I feel like you can share your framework, your system, the tools that they need for them to be successful. And then you hit that wall, which is the mindset. And that one is something that you really have to know how to navigate and how
Mm.
to say the right things and kind of get the creator unstuck from that mindset. The way that you put it is incredible because if you don't like what I'm charging, then what are the options? You don't want to make the content. You don't have the expertise. You don't have the equipment. You will have to outsource this to maybe an agency that will charge you more money. So when you have those arguments, then you feel like, okay, I'm good.
Yeah. Can I also lower the stakes a little bit? I think a lot of people think that pitches are this big high stakes thing where it's like, okay, I got one chance to reach out to my dream brand. And if they ghost me or they say no, I'm going to be crushed and it's going to be a dream killer. What I oftentimes like to say is that the point of a pitch is not to get a deal because the likelihood of that brand being in an active recruitment phase for a campaign that they're trying to run when you reach out is super low. Because again, think about any major brand. Usually they run campaigns in quarters. Okay, we're doing the winter campaign now, and now we're doing the spring campaign. Now it's the summer campaign, holiday campaign, right? So a lot of times, whether it's monthly, quarterly campaigns, whatever it is. And so their phase when they're actively trying to recruit, let's say, creators to talk about them, promote them in their content, do a podcast, ad read, whatever, that may be a 5-day period at the beginning of March or something. And then they lock everyone in for the next 3-6 months or something like that. So when you reach out with your pitch on random June 5th or something, the likelihood of them being like, perfect timing, we're recruiting right now for this next summer campaign or whatever is so low. And so if you can completely change around your expectations of what you're trying to get out of the pitch, the stakes are going to feel a lot lower because now it's like, okay, the goal is actually not to get a deal right away. The goal is to establish the relationship. The goal is to get on their radar. And then once I get that no out of the way, which I'm just going to expect, now I'm going to nurture this relationship every month or every couple weeks because this is the way it works is that, remember, I ran an influencer marketing agency for about 7 years. And this is what happens is that, okay, now we're ready. It takes this creator reaching out on a cadence where they're like, here's an article that's really interesting for you, or here's, a piece of content that I posted that did really well, or I learned this new interesting thing, right? And so you're every month or however often you're following up and you're not just being like, hey, do you have any deals for me? Like, that's not what I'm saying. You're actually providing value when you reach out to them, but it's going to take that maybe 4th, 5th, 6th, 13th email where it's like, hey, how's it going? And the brand, oh, I'm so glad you reached out because we've got something perfect for you. Because brands are busy. They're doing lots of different things. And so sometimes it may just take you being persistent. And again, having a system to remember that you're following up with these brands. I have found that like talking people through how this process actually works makes it a lot more palatable.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Let's talk about how much to charge. And I'm going to tell you a story.
Okay.
A few years ago, when we started being approached by brands and getting ourselves out there was this particular brand who approached us. And before that, we had made videos for other companies. And this particular brand, when we were negotiating, out of the kindness of his heart, which we still make content for them, and that was a great experience. And because of him, like we realized that we were charging too low. When we were negotiating, we told him our price. He paused. He had an option to take it or to coach us. So he said, I think that you should be charging more because of these reasons. And he gave us the reasons and he paid us 4 times more than what we were charging. And because of that, we kind of realized the value that we were bringing, the niche that we were in, and the needs, and how much we could be charging for the work that we do. Talking about how much to charge, it feels like you're shooting in the dark. It feels
Mm,
like you don't know what you're doing. Like you don't want to charge too much because you don't want to scare that brand away, but you don't want to charge too little that everything is going to feel sour, that you're not getting paid well. Is there a formula? Is there something that you can give us, please, that
heck yeah.
can help us?
Heck yeah. All right. So I have found basically all of the calculators that exist out there on the internet are trash, in my opinion. They're not good. Because what I have found is that they calculate your value or your worth in a vacuum. They look at your podcast downloads or they look at your subscribers or followers or average views or whatever. And it's just like, okay, here's how much you're worth based on these metrics that you're getting on social media. And what I have found is that is completely missing 50% of the equation when it comes to the factors that you should be considering for your pricing. So what I teach is that there's 2 main buckets when it comes to pricing. The first is what I call my ARC framework, ARC. And what this means is you have to understand what the brand's objectives are. I talked about that a little bit before, which is it's going to be one of 3 things: awareness, repurposing, or conversion. And the reason that it's so critical that you understand what the brand's objectives are is that your pricing has to change. You're not going to be charging brands who are after conversions and brands who are after awareness the same amount. Let me explain. So let's assume that you ask a brand, hey, what would success look like? What would a win be like? And they'll say, yeah, sales, 50 signups for our trial software or something. This is what's happening on the back end. They have a very specific set of what's called CPA, cost per acquisition metrics. Meaning, okay, if we hire Veronica to talk about our podcast recording tool on her podcast, and she gets on average, let's say 10,000 downloads per episode, we are expecting that of the 10,000 listeners, that 10% of the people click Pod Sound School 10 promo code in the description box. We're hoping 10% of people, right? Then those 1,000 people click through to the landing page. Of the 1,000 people that hit that landing page, we're hoping that 25% actually sign up for a free trial. So that's 250 people out of the original 10,000, right? And we know that of those 250 people that sign up for the free trial, about 20% sign up to be a paying customer. So 50 of those people. And we know as a brand that our service is about $10 a month. And we know that people stick around on average for 10 months. So our lifetime value per customer average is $100, right? $10 a month times 10 months, that's $100. So of the 50 people that we're hoping will sign up to be paying customers, times the LTV, right? That amount of money, $5,000 is the max that we're going to pay Veronica. But actually, hold on a second here. That's the break even. They don't want to just break even, right? They want to turn a profit, which is why they're doing influencer marketing. So in reality, they'll probably want to pay you a half, a third, a fourth, I don't know, maybe less of that, depending on their risk tolerance, because they want to see a return on that investment, right? The reason that brands who have a conversion focused objective are sometimes very difficult to negotiate with is because they have this map that they are beholden to by their boss, or if it's an agency, by their client. They just can't go more than that. And so this is why a lot of people be like, yeah, but hold on a second here. That doesn't make sense, because if I'm driving sales, doesn't that mean I can charge the most because I have something attributable or measurable that I can point to? And it's actually not the case, because in an awareness campaign, the metrics that the brand cares about is totally different. It's impressions, it's views, it's engagement, it's comments, it's things like that. And those metrics are what I call squishier, right? It's like when the person's boss that you're interacting with is not breathing down their neck, being like, how many app downloads or how many signups did we get from that podcast with Veronica? Like, they're not asking that. Do we spread the word? Are people excited about this new campaign? Hopefully. And so your negotiating leverage in that scenario goes way up. Those are just two quick examples, is that this bucket, the ARC framework of understanding the brand's objectives, absolutely has to factor in to your pricing. So that's one bucket. The other 50% of it, Veronica, is what I call the DUE rules, D-U-E. So we're talking the deliverables, the usage rights, and the exclusivity. When it comes to the actual terms of the deal, a lot of brands will reach out and say, oh, we just want to collaborate. We love what you do. Maybe a couple posts a month across all your platforms. Like all this is very amorphous proposal. We have to sit down and be like, no. How many posts? If it's going to be on YouTube, is it integrated or dedicated? If it's on Instagram, is it going to be Reels? Is it going to be a photo carousel? Is it going to be on stories? If it's a newsletter blast, if it's a podcast, is it going to be pre-roll, mid-roll, host thread ad? Like, what is it going to be? You have to scope it, because a lot of those are going to require varying levels of effort from your perspective as a creator. So that's the deliverables. The U in the DO rule is the usage rights. What does the brand want to do with your work after you publish it to extend the mileage of this partnership? So maybe, again, they want to embed it on a website. Maybe they want to put it on their social media. Maybe they want to run paid advertising with it. And for how long do they want to do that? And the final E is the exclusivity. Is the brand saying, hey, you cannot work with any of our competitors for a certain duration? And that is a really critical thing, because that represents a direct opportunity cost. If a competitor were to approach you in 6 months or a year or something, and you signed up for 5 years exclusivity for this one partner, that's a big problem. And so I have designed a really robust calculator in my own program that factors these things in, because if you don't have both these things, you're going to be massively undercharging.
Yeah, definitely. When it comes to exclusivity, have you seen those happening very often? And do you need to have some type of record? Because if a brand approaches me right now and asks me for an exclusivity deal, then there's not a way for me to calculate the opportunity cost, because I haven't been making that many deals a year. Would you recommend a new creator, somebody who's just getting into this, to get into an exclusivity deal?
So let's talk about it from the creator's perspective first, which is that it's in your best interest. Oftentimes, if the brand wants some exclusivity, imagine you're the brand, right? They hire you to promote their brand, and then you turn around a week later promoting their competitor. That doesn't look good for your integrity. You're going to look bad for your audience. Like, you should absolutely have some sort of standards, ethical standards for your own creator business, where you're not taking deals and turning around and talking out of the other side of your mouth 2 weeks later. So that's very important, obviously. But it actually is very critical. I remember a deal that my wife and I did once upon a time. We were negotiating with a consumer packaged good, like food brand. It was a cheese brand. And they said, okay, we want exclusivity for, I think it was like 6 months or something like that. And they said, the category of exclusivity is snacks. And we thought to ourselves, that's a pretty broad category. Like if we were to get a deal with like a potato chip brand, for example, like are our followers not really going to go out and purchase the cheese? Probably not, right? And so we went back to them and we said, hey, you know what? We're okay agreeing to some exclusivity, but instead of snacks, how about we do snacking cheeses? So like string cheese and stuff like that. And they were like, okay, sure. And so wouldn't you know it, a couple weeks after we signed that deal, we got an inquiry from another brand who would have been squarely exclusive. Had we agreed to that snacks category, we wouldn't have been able to do the deal. And so just because it hasn't happened to you yet doesn't mean that you should not protect your future, because you just never know what types of deals are going to land in your inbox.
So as far as how much do you charge? I'm assuming that this exclusivity deal, that's something that you get paid more because of the loss of opportunity cost.
Totally.
From there, then it will be, if you're making content to create awareness, would you agree that that's something that you will get paid more than the conversion?
100%. So the way to look at it is that when it's awareness campaign, you're going to get paid the most. A repurposing campaign is going to be kind of in the middle, and a conversion campaign is going to be the lowest, the hardest to negotiate. Let me simplify this, okay? Because again, I do have a calculator, but if you just need something simple, thumb in the air, a way to like feel good about the rates that you're putting out, the next time that you're on a conversation with a brand, I want everyone listening to do something very simple.
Hey, Jefe, I wanted to interrupt this episode to make sure that you know about my free online mini course for business owners. It's called Idea to Podcast Simplified, and it's a podcasting blueprint for entrepreneurs and those wanting to break into the online business world. It's totally free to sign up, so go to podcastingsmart.com or check the description for the link. Now, let's go back to the episode.
You ask questions. Throughout the entire conversation, you say, tell me about your objectives. Tell me what's coming down the product roadmap for you. Tell me what challenges you're having in your brand. Like you ask questions, you research it ahead of time. And then at the very end, they're going to say, hey, so how much do you charge? Like ballpark range, like per podcast ad read, like just let me know. You probably had this happen, Veronica, right? And so instead of being like, $1,000, right? And just like stuttering and like spitting out a number and like regretting it later, you can say, hey, look, thank you, brand. This was very helpful, all this information. What I would like to do is I'm going to go back and I'd love to put some thought into how I could potentially bring this partnership to life. What I typically do is I'm going to put together a proposal for you that usually has, let's say, 3 to 4 different tiers of what's possible. Do you have a sense, brand, of what I should set those 3 or 4 tiers at from a budget feasibility perspective? You don't ask them what their budget is. This is a very different question, because what you're doing is you're giving them an out. They're feeling as though, okay, we can give Veronica a conservative range here. We can say 1, 2, 3K or 5, 10, 15K or something like that, right? And so now you accomplish a couple things by doing that. Number one, you know how seriously you should take this proposal, right? Because if they're like 500, 1,000, 1,500, it's like, oh man, I'm not going to spend as much time as the 10, 20, 30K person or whatever, obviously. But the other thing too is that you have to remember when a brand reaches out to you, they're not just reaching out to you usually. They're reaching out to, let's say, 10, 15, 50 other creators maybe. And so what they're doing is they have this much larger budget, usually, let's say 100K or 500K or however big the campaign is. And they are trying to Tetris everyone together. So they're talking with Veronica, they're talking with Justin, they're talking with all these people, and everyone's charging different amounts. But remember, they have this one large budget over here. And so what they're trying to do is piecemeal it all together. And so if you're able to come back to them with a couple different tiers of what's possible, now they have more to work with, more to play with to potentially Tetris you when they're trying to get this deal across the finish line. In my experience, about 75% of the time, Veronica, they will tell you a range. I've done this across hundreds of conversations. But then in the other 25% of the time, they're going to say, we don't know, you tell us. We don't have a budget, or I don't know, we were not experienced, like you tell us. And so what I advise people to do is you have to pick your hell yeah number. When you submit your packages to them, package one has to be, okay, if they choose this package, which is the lowest tier, I'm going to say, hell yeah, I'm so excited, let's do this. I don't say, oh, now I got to do this. And you resent it. That's the last thing you want. And so if at the very least, if you have no idea, just make sure that package one is that hell yeah number.
Now let's talk about the process. How big do I need to be as a creator to start reaching out, to say, okay, I'm ready. I'm going to start reaching out. What are the numbers?
I have a video on my YouTube channel called How to Get Sponsorships with 0 Subscribers.
Love it.
I said, so the reason I made that video, so there's this concept that I talk about called the sponsorship continuum. Because when you're just starting out and you don't have a large audience, or you don't have a lot of expertise, or you don't have a lot of influence, then if you were to reach out to a brand and say, hey, I would love to talk about you to my 200 podcast listeners, that's probably not going to move the needle for the brand. Let's be real here, right? And so what you're pitching in the beginning is not that. The thrust of your pitch changes. So you know what you should probably do instead is you say, okay, I'm going to go and do an audit of this brand's holistic social presence. I'm going to go look and see, oh, wow, they're not uploading any YouTube videos. Oh, wow, they don't have a TikTok presence. Oh, wow, they don't have a podcast for their own brand. They don't have this XYZ. Well, that's interesting. So I'm going to reach out and say, hey, big fan of your brand, been using it for X years. I think that there's a way in which you can be telling your brand story in a more compelling way on social media. I would love to help you do that in the following way. I can make 5 to 10 videos for you a month that you post on your social media brand. I can stand up a podcast for you. I can do XYZ for you. And oh, by the way, go take a look at my podcast or my YouTube channel, because that's my portfolio. So the beautiful thing about this type of situation is that the amount that you can charge the brand is completely detached from your social metrics or your following, because that's not what you're pitching to the brand. So that's the beginning. And then let's say you grow a little bit, right? You move further on to the continuum. Now you're getting, let's say, thousands of views or listens on your podcast. Yeah, maybe the pitch is a hybrid now, where you're pitching to do some work for them, maybe doing some consulting, creating content for their brand. But yeah, maybe now you're going to be talking about them on your platforms. That becomes part of the deal. And then now you're at the very end of the spectrum, right? You are achieving serious scale now. You're doing tens of thousands of views, downloads, or whatever on your platforms. Yeah, maybe the thrust of your pitch now, of course, is, hey, I'm going to talk about your brand on my platform. That's the entire thrust of my pitch now, because it makes sense to the brand. And so I love talking through this continuum because it gives people permission. It doesn't matter how many followers you have, how many views, whether some random brand told you one day, oh, we only work with people who have 10,000 followers or more. Like, that's not what every brand thinks. And so the onus is up to you to actually educate the brand about the best way in which you can serve them.
I think it's just the fact that you can be proactive, that you don't have to sit down and wait to hit some sort of a mark, that you can take action and start reaching out. Yes, you may get a lot of no's, but the experience, the feedback that you will get will help you so much in making your content better and in getting experience to and dealing with brands and knowing what to say and how to navigate this world. What's the first step? So I say, Justin, I'm ready. Here I am with my podcast, with my YouTube channel. What do I do?
The first step is signing up for my free newsletter, Veronica.
Yes, absolutely.
Creatorwizard.com/join. I'm sending you paid sponsorship opportunities for free every week. Did you like that shameless plug, by the way? I thought that was pretty sweet.
No, I love it. You can do anything. Listen, what you do is so valuable that yes.
So the first step is realizing that you don't need permission from anyone. You don't need to wait around. You don't need to sit on your hands to do any of this. All it takes is you actually sitting down and doing a little bit of research on some of the brands that you would love to collaborate with and see how you can serve them. I think this is a great opportunity to talk about the pitching methodology that I teach, which is that a lot of the thrust of a lot of pitches is like, it's very narcissistic. It's very creator focused. It's very me focused. It's like, hi, my name is Justin. I have this many followers. This is my audience demographics. I get this many views per video. It's like, I would love to expose your brand to my audience, you know, this type of thing.
I'm laughing because I've done it.
Yeah, everyone's done it. I did that. Everyone does it, right? Because that's what you think
and then you get hurt. And then you get hurt when they say no, because you made it about yourself.
And then, not only do you get hurt, but now you're like, I didn't like that brand anyway. Like, screw them. Do they know what they're missing out on? Like, how dare they? And so you become a hater. It's like, it's so stupid, right? And it's like in reality, no, you haven't actually told them how you could actually move the needle for their brand. And so the pitching methodology that I teach is called the ROPE method. So ROPE. R stands for your pitch has to be relevant to a campaign that the brand has either run in the past or is currently running. O stands for organic, meaning that you can tie your pitch back to organic work that you've already published that illustrates that your audience has an affinity for their brand or their product. P stands for proof, so you can show how you've helped other brands achieve results. And E stands for easy to execute. When they say, oh yeah, we're interested, like, let's talk. The form that this pitch could take, actually, let's do a real life example, Veronica. What's a brand that you would love to collaborate with? And we'll do a real pitch.
Spotify.
Okay, so what's your idea? Like, why is Spotify such a great fit?
Because we teach people how to podcast because we've made videos about Spotify for podcasters on our channel and have performed very well. One of the best performing videos on our channel is talking about how to start a podcast with your phone. We love Spotify as a brand.
So one thing that I was doing as you were talking was I pulled up Spotify's Instagram, okay?
Mhm.
Because again, we talked about research, right? I want to understand like what is going on in Spotify's world. So the first couple things that I notice are they're posting a lot of celebrity type, focused content, podcasts that people are on, Spotify exclusive podcasts and so on. But they're also posting these like top album debuts, like rankings lists. One thing that I would, okay, so here we go, Spotify classics, what makes a classics album. So clip of the week. This is interesting. And so these are all what I would call campaigns. These are all things that Spotify has decided that, hey, this is something that we want to promote this week, this year, whatever. What I would probably want to do, what is this? Messy portraits with armchair experts. So like one thing that you could, Spotify AI DJ reads your love notes. So this is like a treasure trove of what they think is important. Another like next level tactic that you could do is, here's a great example. Like, let's say that you're a podcast that talks about love, relationships, this type of thing. If I went and scrolled back on Spotify's Instagram last year, Veronica, I would see that they were doing some posts around Valentine's Day about what your vibe is, find your Valentine's Day playlist, this type of thing. And so the thrust of the pitch that when I reach out to Spotify is, hey, I saw that you were promoting how people can choose their Valentine's Day vibe last year. Are you going to be running a similar series of posts like that this year? I would love to help you promote that and spread the word about that. Remember, by the way, you're pitching them in December for this, Veronica. You're not pitching them on February 1st. Right? Because they're preparing these things months in advance, especially for a very large company like Spotify, who has usually multiple agencies in the mix as well. So by the way, pulling that example, you say, hey, would love to help you spread the word about this Valentine's Day series that you're doing. I also post about the benefits of increasing romanticism in your relationship with your partner through music or something. And then you link an episode of your podcast where you talk about something like that. That's the O in the rope method, right? And then right after that, you are telling them what's easy to execute. We'll skip the P for a second. You're saying, hey, I would love to do 10 podcast insertions. There'll be mid-rolls. I can turn them around in 10 days. I'll give you usage rights to reshare it on the Spotify Instagram page, et cetera, et cetera. And then the last frame is happy to share some results of how I've helped Riverside achieve results on a past campaign. Are you free on Thursday at 10 a.m. to talk about this? That's the thrust of this pitch. And so you notice how the only thing that you did to talk about yourself is linking an episode. You're not telling them anything else because, again, at the end of the day, they don't give a crap about who you are. There's lots of people who have large social media followings or lots of people who have large podcasts. That's table stakes. It's about how can you help them accomplish a business objective by sponsoring you.
Let's say I'm ready to do that. Who do I contact? Where do I find them? Do I go to LinkedIn? Where do I go?
Absolutely. So LinkedIn is absolute gold mine for sure. But the more important thing to discuss is that not all job titles are made equal based on the scale of the organization. So if you're wanting to pitch a smaller company, let's say less than 15 employees, the director of marketing is probably the only person on the marketing team who works there, or marketing manager, or maybe the marketing coordinator or something. There's not really anyone else on the marketing team. So that's probably your person. They're doing everything. They're doing the Google pay-per-click ads, the meta ads. And if they're working with partners, that's probably the person. So yeah, targeting that person is probably fine. However, when you start targeting, let's say mid-tier brands where let's say maybe it's between 16 and 100 employees, there probably is multiple people on their marketing team now, or there might even be multiple layers. So now you have directors, you have managers, you have coordinators. You're not going to be wanting to target the CEO or the CMO or the brand manager or the president or those types of titles. They probably have absolutely nothing to do with hiring creators for paid campaigns. And then if you're going really after the scale, you're going after the conglomerates or the really large companies, they have now likely delegated creator strategy to an agency, an advertising agency or a PR agency, or maybe even an influencer agency to handle this type of stuff for them. And so this is a really, really important thing to educate yourself around the types of titles, because this is what happens is that people convince themselves that pitching doesn't work because they do two things wrong. They have really crappy pitches, like I just described, or they're sending it to the wrong person. And they're like, pitching doesn't work. Well, it's like, what do you do when you receive a pitch or an email that was clearly not meant for you? You either don't respond or you delete it, right? And so you have to spend just as much effort educating yourself around who do I believe is the exact person that's right for this based on, like you said, analyzing their LinkedIn, job descriptions, analyzing what they're posting on LinkedIn. A lot of these professionals are posting stuff on LinkedIn and they'll be like, oh, cool, we just did this partnership with this creator. Oh, probably that's the person. So I go into a lot of detail in my program about how you analyze this type of stuff because it's an art and a science for sure.
Let's talk about content. Should I worry about the quality of my content, the quality of my videos, whether my podcast sounds professional, or can I just make videos with my iPhone and just be okay with that and start reaching out to brands?
The brilliant thing about nowadays compared to when my wife and I started is like literally, Veronica, my wife filmed her first YouTube video on our webcam. It was like 180p or 244p. It was terrible. It was so pixelated. And I remember we edited it on like Windows Movie Maker. It was so bad. It was so bad, Veronica, but we did it. And the brilliant thing that probably everyone listening here is that pretty much every smartphone that we're all carrying around these days, you can shoot 4K, beautiful video. The audio's pretty awesome. If you want to step it up and buy a $100, $150 microphone to plug into your phone to make it better and maybe a ring light, like you're good. You're good, trust me. Like compared to what we had back in the day, you should not let the technology be an obstacle at all.
Love it. You're so generous with what you know. Do you have any case studies from like this creator got this much and it blew our minds? Can you share 2 case studies that my audience would be interested in listening?
So a couple of stories I can share. This actually was pretty surprising. So a creator hired me for a coaching session and a brand had come to them and say, hey, we have $5,000 left in our quarterly budget and we would love to work with you. But what they were asking for, the scope of work, would have cost what the creator normally charged would be closer to $10,000. So there was like a discrepancy here of about $5K. What do most creators do in this situation? They do 3 things. Usually they either say they accept it. They just, okay, 5K. They don't concede anything. They say, okay, I'll do it for that scope of work. They just concede nothing. They come down on their rate and it's like, oh, great, right? So that's not ideal, but I guess you made the money, so that's good. The second thing that they do is they just say no. They walk away. Sorry, like it's 10K or nothing, right? Or a third option is they still say no, and then they drag the brand publicly on social media. They make a TikTok and they're like, this brand is making $100 million in revenue and they lowballed me. How dare them, right? You've seen these TikToks, right?
Uh-huh.
So obviously don't do that. Anyone listening, don't be that person. And so this creator who hired me for a coaching session was leaning towards the second option, just saying no, walking away. So I said, look, instead of that, let's actually be creative here. It sounds like the brand has some budget constraints. So why don't we go to them and say, hey, look, I'd love to collaborate here. How about you pay me $5K in this quarter's budget and you can pay me the remaining balance out of next quarter's budget when that rolls around. And the creator said, there's no way that like having flexible payment terms, they're not going to go for that. You know what the brand said, Veronica? They said, you would do that for us? We didn't know that installments were even an option. In that case, can we do a 12-month deal at $5,000 a month?
Wow.
So this deal went from a 5K that almost fell apart to a $60,000 deal. So honestly, if you can understand and be creative during the negotiation of how you can help the brand navigate kind of complex red tape internally, it can just be transformative. This creator had never made that amount of money ever in their life. And so not only was it mind-blowing, but it gave them income certainty for the next year. They're like, wow, I know that I'm going to be making this 5K a month for the next year. That's a huge deal.
Wow. That's incredible.
And then the second case study, and this will be right up your alley. So one of my longest running clients, his name is Paul. He has a podcast called the Green Industry Podcast. You'll love this because his podcast helps lawn care professionals grow their businesses. And he's getting 150,000 listens every month on this podcast. Talk about niche, right? Before Paul and I started working together, he was running up against a brick wall because in his industry, brands were only ever offering free stuff. These lawnmowers are expensive, so that should just be compensation enough. Or these hedge trimmers, or we're going to give it to you on loan for 3 months, right? Because this is a $10,000 piece of equipment or whatever, right? And so it was just hearing the runaround all the time. And so what we shifted into was education mode. All these brands and all these agencies that he was talking to, he started going to all these trade shows and just talking with these brands about the value of partnering with creators. His whole thing was like, look, the people in my audience, they're not watching YouTube really. They're not watching short form content. They're on their lawnmowers all day and they're listening to my podcast. This is a perfect audience that you want to get in front of. And so it took a while. It took 12, 18 months of him just educating, running up against the brick wall until finally one of the largest advertisers in his space finally decided, you know what, let's give this a shot. And you know what's brilliant about what happens in these scenarios is that when one domino falls, oftentimes all the other players in the industry are going, whoa, what does that brand know that we don't? And then they all start jumping in and start working with creators now. And so it is an absolute night and day difference. He's working with all the large brands, John Deere and Lowe's, and like you would name it, like a lot of these huge players. Because the other brilliant thing about having a niche podcast, let's just be clear here, is that there's not a lot of people who have the ear of that type of customer, of that type of consumer, right? And so this is a whole other conversation around having a niche. I mean, I'm a sponsorship coach. How much more niche can you get, right? But it's like, it makes a really, really big difference. And so I love sharing that anecdote around Paul because his business it's just day and night compared to where he was before.
Businesses, they've been doing advertisement, they've been doing their marketing in a different way, UCG and content marketing and influencer marketing and all that. It seems to me like it's something new that we know who we are and what we do, but a lot of people out of our circle, out of our industry, they don't know. And you have to start with educating them and understanding what's going on. And some companies are just set on the way that they've been doing marketing and slowly are realizing, heck, this isn't working anymore. We're just throwing a lot of money on ad campaigns that are not bringing the amount of customers. They sit down and they look at the cost per acquisition of each customer and it just doesn't add up. So it seems to me like they are willing to keep paying money for something that they can track instead of investing in something that is not really trackable, but is effective.
The point you talk about inertia is very real. Like this idea, the incumbents, the traditional brands, it's like scary to like go out and try this new thing. And if it doesn't work, they're accountable to their boss or their client who'd be like, oh, you just told us to spend 100K on this and it didn't work. You're fired. That's scary. It's a real thing. These are people who want to get promoted, right? On the other side of it, they don't want to like risk the status quo. And so you have to understand and have empathy for why they might be shy or scared to do some of this stuff. The other risk that's really like dangerous, Veronica, is a lot of creators have the tendency to basically come into the brand and be like, you're an idiot. Why are you guys running magazine ads still? Why are you running ads on billboards? Like, why are you doing all these stupid, traditional, archaic advertising strategies? It makes so much more sense to hire me or hire social media creators. And they have this kind of attitude. And here the brand isn't being like, oh, well, that was actually me. I was the one who was doing all those traditional things. And so you're basically telling them that they're an idiot, right? And so a much better tone to strike is, hey, I'm not telling you that you need to stop doing what you're currently doing. What I am proposing could actually be a supplement to help those traditional strategies that you're employing be even more effective. And so rather than being like, hey, let's take the ship and go like this, which everyone is super scared to do, you're saying, hey, let's take the ship that you're currently doing and go like this. Let's just go a little bit. It's much easier to make that course correction than it is this giant gargantuan move.
When it comes to podcasting, what you said is so true. Like I was thinking the example that you share about your client and how attention is so important and how with a podcast you can capture the attention of your audience for longer. And the longer you stay with your audience, then the higher the chances that they will buy your offers, the higher the chances that you will have better conversions down the road. How would you advise podcasters to phrase their pitches when they are talking to brands? How would you coach a podcast creator to approach a brand, to talk about what he's doing, to talk about the audience that he has been nurturing for months or years, and present this to a brand?
The first piece of advice that I would give is don't just be a podcaster. Because if the only content format, if the only inventory that you have is a podcast ad read, then you are going to come across sponsors and brands very frequently who are just not interested in that. They've either never done podcasts before, they don't really think it's a reliable strategy, and actually even worse, you're now commoditized because you're going to have to sell based on CPM. They're like, oh, well, this show over here gets 10,000 downloads and you get 1,000 and you want to charge the same amount as them? Like, fat chance, right? It's very easy to be commoditized. And so the first exercise that I sit podcasters down and go through is what other content formats, what other things can we provide to a potential sponsor that is not just a podcast ad read? So whether this is social media, maybe you have a presence on TikTok, Instagram, whatever. Maybe you have a newsletter. Maybe you have a private community. If you're sitting here thinking like, Justin, oh my God, I'm so exhausted already doing the podcast. Like, I can't add more things onto what I'm doing. I'm saying, okay, fine. If you want to be commoditized, if you want to walk away from a bunch of deals, fine. But if you can just add one more thing, and in fact, it's actually service-based, because I bet you there's ways in which you can serve your audience in other formats, in other ways. Maybe it's video, maybe it's written, whatever it is, because that now opens up so many more opportunities. So this is what happens when a brand comes inbound to me, Veronica, for example, and they say, hey, Justin, we just want to partner with you. This is what we say. Hey, we just want to partner with you. Remember, I ask about their objectives. What would success look like? What's a win? And every brand is going to say something different. And so brand A over here is going to be like, hey, Justin, like awareness. That's what we care most about. I say, okay, great. I'm going to pitch you, brand, the YouTube channel and the podcast. That's going to be the best fit for you because that's what you're looking for. Brand B over here comes and says, Justin, conversions. We want people to sign up for this free webinar that we're about to host. I say, okay, let's do the newsletter because that's the thing that you want. You're trying to drive something measurable, a measurable outcome. And brand C over here, hey, I'll come and do a webinar for your customers, brand C. You're desperate to talk about anything other than your product. Let me go and serve your customers, right? And so this is a very liberating mindset for a lot of creatives because it's not just about the content formats that you have. You should be thinking about, okay, what track should I slot each of these partners in? And if the only thing that you have to offer brands is a podcast ad read, you're going to have a hard time.
I love it. So why don't you leave us with some words of encouragement, with something like you feel like you need to say, like you have to say it, like somebody is listening, somebody's watching this. What are those words that they need right now to take action on anything related to what we have covered in this episode?
I don't care whether you're 300 episodes deep and have never been sponsored, or you literally have never launched. You can get sponsorships. I got my podcast sponsored before I even launched it, before I even released one episode. So you can't imagine these arbitrary thresholds or milestones in your mind of like, I just have to reach this before I can take action. It's just not true. That's in your head. And so all it's going to take is for you reaching out to a brand, hitting send on that email, and amazing things can happen.
And get creative, right?
Yep, exactly.
So how can we work with you? Where can we find you? What do you have going on right now? Tell us.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, creatorwizard.com/join is the best way to stay updated on everything that's going on in my world. As I mentioned, I have the paid sponsorship opportunities that I send out every Thursday, but I also send out videos, articles on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Saturdays, all around pitching and negotiating, kind of next level tactics around making more money, collaborating with brands as a creator. And so if that sounds up your alley, would love to have y'all.
Awesome. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you being so generous.
Of course. Thanks again, Veronica.
Wow, that was some incredible information. Truly a masterclass session in sponsorships. I hope you were taking notes. Remember that you can always come back and watch again, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes. Each episode, we share actionable strategies and tips for business growth. Our mission is to help as many business owners as possible send out online and enjoy financial freedom doing something fulfilling. So help us achieve this goal and share this podcast with another business owner. Okay, until next time, Jefe out.